Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining me. It is our weekend edition. Penna Dexter, Kelly Shackelford in studio. A little bit later, Lathan Watts will be joining us as well. I think he's getting off an airplane right now, so we'll look forward to hearing from him as well. Going to talk a little bit about the 8 counts. First of all, 8 counts guilty for Paul Manafort. 8 counts pled guilty by Michael Cohen. We'll also get into some other issues of campaign finance and those conversations. Also, of course, since we have our friends from First Liberty here, we've got a number of religious liberty cases. Then a little bit later, we'll get into whether or not there's a blue wave coming. And you might remember some of the conversation we had last week about Chelsea Clinton, and now Penna has a commentary. Chelsea's terrible argument. David French has put together a piece on this issue of illegal immigrant crime because of the case out of Iowa. Whether or not we're going to fire an attorney general, whether or not there will be an impeachment of the president. Boy, Penna Dexter, we have lots to talk about today.
We do. And, you know, it's like a dual track in a sense, because you're looking at some very important issues that we're covering, changes that are being made in the country. And there's a sense in which the country's been being brought back to what the founders meant it to be in many ways. And, you know, big changes being made. And then on the other side of it, there's, you know, criminalization of politics, yes, in a sense. I mean, if you are accomplishing something, your enemies are going to be finding things about you to go after. And that's the way politics has become. And I think this is probably, you know, maybe other than Watergate, one of the worst times ever of us having to kind of put up with all that.
Well, and again, it's the old Charles Dickens, best of times, worst of times, best of times, something else I haven't mentioned yet. That is, Mitch McConnell says, I'm not putting up with this anymore. We're going to keep moving these qualified individuals onto the court, and we've seen some remarkable changes in terms of the economy and other things. But then, of course, we have all the criminalization right now, Kelly Shackelford, of individuals who I think are being prosecuted in part because they have some connection to Donald Trump.
Yeah, I think it's very dangerous. I've been talking about this for, I don't know if it's 10 years, but at least 5, 6, 7 years. You know, it started, if you remember, Tom DeLay had to go through, and these people have to step down when they're undergoing all this, and they have to spend millions of dollars of their own money. They can't spend campaign money to defend themselves. And so it's really, it's kind of the new game, and I almost wish there was a way to punish people for prosecuting people for politics if they really weren't guilty of any laws, because it really is damaging to our system. The idea that if people think that if they run for office, now they're in danger and they could be convicted of some crime they had no idea even existed, which is a lot of this stuff is so it's so, mundane and nobody even knows. There's the book, 3 felonies a day?
Yeah.
The average American commits
Foundation. Yeah.
3 felonies a day, doesn't even know it. I think this is really dangerous what's going on, and I hope, I don't see how, but I hope we're able to turn away from it eventually, because I think it's, the very thing, the ability to vote, to run for office, those things are being so criminalized, politicized into crimes that there's almost no difference between, criminal and political these days. And that's not good. It doesn't need to be that way. We should we shouldn't discourage really good people from running from office, and I think that we're in the process of doing that.
Well, let's again maybe help people understand that sometimes you do believe that the rules have changed. One of the things that we quoted from a piece that we posted a few days ago by Andrew McCarthy reminded us that in 2008, the Obama campaign accepted nearly $2 million in illegal campaign contributions, but they were permitted to settle that with a fine. Then he goes on and says, but we've had some other individuals who have been treated with a felony. And, of course, we can talk about one of those in just a minute. But one individual that's been sitting in that chair before, Penna, is Dinesh D'Souza, for a comparatively tiny one. Now, again, eventually the president decided to pardon him. But when you look at some of those situations, Paul Manafort was involved in some of this in 2005 and 2006. Was in the campaign for 6 months. So I think when Robert Mueller writes his report, at the very least, he's got to say that maybe the president, or at that time, the candidate, Donald Trump, didn't exercise judgment by bringing in an individual that has connections to the Ukraine. And then, of course, when you talk about Michael Cohen, as again, Andrew McCarthy points out that this is kind of an intriguing thing as well, because he wasn't necessarily given the kind of protection that you would expect, but maybe felt again that he had to plead guilty to those 8 counts. So we'll see where that goes. But again, there's a sense right now that not everyone is treated the same under the criminal justice system.
Well, that's very true. It was interesting when you talk about Manafort and Cohen, because Karl Rove had a couple things to say about him in his column this week. He said Manafort, and he says that in campaigns and in presidencies, you get these people that come along with the candidates sometimes. And for Trump, Manafort, Rove calls him a grifter. And a grifter is someone who's trying to refresh their credentials so they can sell their services to foreign governments and political parties, or they can do business, they use it for business, trying to buy influence. And then, so that is one. And then the strap hangers, which is what Cohen was, because he was, he shows up. He was Trump's lawyer, but they're always trying to get a job in the West Wing. Either that, or if they can't get a job in the West Wing, at least cash in on their connections. And I think he learned early on he wasn't getting any jobs in the administration, and so he was pretty bold about cashing in a sense. So you had these two. Not to say that Trump doesn't have some terrible things in his background that, we're embarrassed about, but they are a long time ago. And, for instance, it's going to be very difficult to prove anything about the payments to the women,
right,
that they were campaign contributions. I don't think that they will be able to. Kelly may have some different opinions on that.
I definitely have some strong opinions about what I've seen with the Cohen case. The Manafort thing is just, Manafort's obviously got problems,
yeah.
and the president picked him up in the campaign because he was trying to ready himself for the convention, and Manafort had experience sort of running the Republican convention operation for a number of past candidates, Bob Dole, etc. So that's why that happened. But
of course.
But Manafort, he's definitely, he has some, he's obviously not a clean guy.
Yeah.
Now Cohen is a different story. I think what happened there is really, really, I don't know. It's bad on a lot of levels. First, I think what he clearly did is he was guilty of some things, and so in order to sort of do a package deal, they had him plead guilty to something that wasn't even a crime, just so they could connect the president. That's really slimy activity by people who are prosecutors. That should not happen. The president can write a check to his own campaign.
Right.
Campaign finance is about other people donating to your campaign.
Yeah. And I'll come back and also kind of give you a point-counterpoint. Mark Levin said one thing, Alan Dershowitz said the other, so you get a chance to hear some comments about Michael Cohen. We'll be back right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
No doubt when you were growing up, some adult admonished you to say what you mean and mean what you say. That advice should be spread far and wide when politicians, commentators, and others use words and phrases without any precision. When the New York Times hired Sarah Jeong, critics pointed to all of her tweets and verbal attacks on white people and law enforcement. J.J. McCullough, in a recent commentary, reminds us that one of the defenses of her horrible statements was that all of this was done satirically and hyperbolically. Well, using extreme language and hyperbole may get you hired at the New York Times, but it won't work in the real world. While taking a tour of the White House, say you wish you could kill the president. See how that works out for you. While you're in a police station, say that you wish all the cops would die. I doubt you'd get a linguistic pass for that statement. And the term fake news used to be applied to websites, like The Onion, that use satire to make a political point. Today, the term has been so overused that it's almost meaningless. For most people today, the term fake news is used to describe a story or a news organization they dislike. And while we're talking about hyperbole and fake news, we need to mention the president's tweets. Some of his defenders try to defend his indefensible comments by saying we shouldn't always take what he writes literally. No, we should take the words and actions of a president seriously. We also have heard the term deep state used indiscriminately. It used to mean a nefarious group of insiders in a foreign government. Today, it's often used to describe some federal bureaucrat you don't like and don't trust. These are just a few examples of why our elders told us to say what you mean and mean what you say. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kerby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back once again, if you would like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Not going to spend a lot more time on Paul Manafort and Michael Cohen, but it is in the news, so we like to get some comments, especially from around the round table. And one of the articles we posted yesterday, I think it's up there again today, is a good summary by Mike Huckabee, in which he points out that Mark Levin on his program pointed out, first of all, that Lanny Davis, and I do want to hear Kelly's comments about Lanny Davis, who just by coincidence happens to be representing Michael Cohen, and if you don't remember him, he used to be the general counsel for the Clintons. So there's all sorts of issues there. But anyway, had Cohen plead guilty to 2 campaign finance violations that don't actually exist. Another issue we'll put on the table. Besides that, there's a plea bargain, which is interesting because if you look at this, one of the things we had even talked about earlier with some of the other work that was done by, I think this in case Andrew McCarthy's pointed out, this really is an interesting plea bargain. It's not what's called a cooperative agreement. And so maybe this is an individual saying, okay, I'll say anything you want so I don't have to go to prison. So that makes
Does it
everything
also mean
suspect.
they don't have to release any more later down the road? That's why
Yeah.
it's not cooperative.
So, yeah, all sorts of things. So, again, back to Kelly's point, Mark Levin made a real case that if someone spends his own money or even corporate money on something that occurs as a result of the campaign, it's not a campaign expenditure, even if it affects the election. So, a person gets a new suit, person gets a haircut. I mean, a person wants to suppress information that can still be considered legal and not a campaign violation. Alan Dershowitz has a slightly different take, that if the money was originally made by, if the payment was made by someone else, which would be Michael Cohen, it might be technically an unreported campaign contribution, but he likened that to jaywalking. So,
but what if you get paid back?
Yeah. So if it's a loan, that's another issue. So this, to me, Kelly, strikes me, and maybe to a lot of our listeners, is a lot of fury over a very, very little. What's your thoughts?
No, I agree. I think this whole brouhaha over, oh no, Cohen pled guilty to a campaign finance violation, and so Trump's involved. People just don't understand the law, and so you can do that kind of stuff, and people are, the Trump derangement syndrome is alive and well. People just so want to get Trump that they think they got him with that. That's not again, if Trump wanted to write $1 million check, everybody else is limited to what they can give to a candidate. What is it, $2,700, I think?
That's correct.
Trump, what if he wrote $1 million check? It must be a campaign finance violation. No, he's writing his own campaign. He can do that all he wants. Can he pay off, women who were going to hurt his campaign? Sure he can. He can do all those things. So this whole thing is not a violation. Again, if you found any violation, you could say maybe he loaned to his own campaign and it wasn't reported. But that's still so bizarre. I mean, that's just like Alan Dershowitz said, that's like jaywalking. I mean, none of this falls into the realm. Now, the thing that really, really bothered me about this was, and I don't know how this happened. Maybe this will come out someday. Maybe it won't. But how in the world did Cohen get as his attorney
Lanny Davis?
Whoa.
Yeah.
And look, I'll say I've watched Lanny Davis on TV. I thought he was a more reasonable person from the Clinton camp as far as admitting things that were not good or et cetera, and being a little more honest. But wow, the conduct I saw in his representation of Cohen to me was something that, it really struck against, and it was interesting because it bothered me immediately. I went, this just feels totally unethical, everything I'm watching. And then I heard 2 or 3 different people, like a few days later on TV, say that, and I thought, okay, I'm not just by myself. The job of a lawyer is to zealously represent their client, not their own interest. And in this case, I think what you had here is, number one, you had bank fraud and these type of things that Cohen was caught in, and plus they could have gone after his family somewhat. And so in order to say, all right, we'll just wrap this all up, we'll do 3 to 5 years for everything, but we want you to include in the list here these campaign finance violations that aren't violations. And he was like, oh, whatever, I'll sign whatever, you're knocking down my years. But the thing that really bothered me was the day that all this happened, for Lanny Davis to go out on TV and to attack the president it was clearly political. It was clearly like it was a Clinton campaign. And when the president is being rumored to be considering pardons for Manafort and Cohen, if Cohen had done whatever, it doesn't make any sense. If I'm the lawyer, I'm just sitting there thinking, if I'm Cohen's lawyer, I work out the best deal I can, and I go out and I say nice things about everybody who can do something for my client. But for him to go and attack at the president, it was obviously his politics were what was important to him and not his client. And that is really wrong. That should not occur. And that whole thing just looked bad. It was bad. And again, I don't think it's going to result in anything because there's no violation by the president if he writes a check to his own campaign. But I just think that looked bad for the legal community. That's lawyers, if they can be criticized for a lot of things, but the one thing they usually know to do is they zealously defend their client.
Right.
They make every argument they can. They do what they can to zealously, and they're at least not pushing their own personal interests above those of their client. That's really bad when that happens.
It seems like the current environment is taking people out of the bounds of their professionalism in many ways. Yeah. That may be the case with Davis. He is so political. I was a little surprised that he was even the attorney for Cohen. But Trump himself, there's just times in which I hope that he just will focus on the agenda now. We always say that. He needs to focus on the agenda, because if he's focusing on some of the things he has to defend himself for now are distasteful. So focus on the agenda.
This thing is, there's so many levels of this thing. It's number one, the whole investigation itself is invalid, right? It started because of the dossier, which itself was, completely invalid. And then you got the lying to the FISA court. You've got, I just look at, one of the controversies today is about Sessions recusing himself.
There you go.
All right. You look at Sessions, and it's like, well, there might be some connections there where maybe, he would recuse himself. His conflicts of interest are nowhere near as bad as Rosenstein's, as Mueller's, as Comey, and all. It's like, well, those guys should have recused themselves.
Well said.
The whole
I think
thing
that's
is
why
just,
Trump's mad.
Yeah, it's so
like, why did he do
bizarre.
it?
It's almost like Sessions should say, I take it back.
Yeah.
Because I'm looking down the line, and actually there's more conflicts of interest because I'm not involved. I could make sure this is done, above board, but it's just weird to watch all. And again, at the end of all this, what could happen? Can you indict the president? No, you can't indict the president. So what is this whole thing for? You're trying to get information to see if he can be impeached? That's the job of the Justice Department? That's not the job of the Justice Department. Everything about this is really wrong, and I hope we never repeat this again. We don't need to have this type of thing happening to our presidency.
Well, we need to take a break. Let me just mention in passing, because when we come back, I see that Lathan is going to join us. We'll talk about some of these religious liberty cases. One other case that we did mention earlier in the week, Duncan Hunter and his wife, Margaret, were indicted on Tuesday for misusing $250,000 of campaign funds for personal expenses. You might say, what'd they spend it on? Well, an Italian vacation, dental work, purchases of a surf shop, huge tabs at bars and restaurants in San Diego, Washington, D.C., on and on and on. Matter of fact, the one that I thought was the most bizarre was the credit card. The campaign credit card was used for a flight for their pet rabbit. So, again, the concern about this is that he has said he's going to still run again. We had, of course, one representative up in New York who was actually cited for insider trading. But this, when we come back a little bit later, Penna, to talk about whether a blue wave is coming, this could be what has been pretty much a safe Republican seat, could be taken by the Democrats. So it's something to pay attention to as well.
I think, somebody who was actually wise would step down. There's a lot of talented politicians down there in San Diego.
Yes.
It's too bad. His dad was a wonderful congressman, and he's actually been very conservative. But,
we like both of the father and the son, and maybe it's just the wife, but $250,000. I mean, this one's obvious. And again, the impact that this could have on other individuals that, as Kelly said, might run, or just even the impact of whether or not that becomes another seat the Democrats pick up, and then Nancy Pelosi or someone like her is Speaker of the House. We'll be right back.
There is no more dangerous time than when things are going well. Remember Elijah on Mount Carmel? Fire came down. There was no doubt who was God, but what happened next? He went from amazing faith to a time of great fear and depression. Many Christians have been very thankful a certain Democratic candidate for president was not the one to nominate two replacements for the Supreme Court. But as with Elijah, times of great victory are also times of great danger. Moments like this are not the time to take it easy. This is not the time to let our guard down. This is a time to double down on our work in the community, to serve and pray and plan and invest in a better future. This is the time to join Point of View's Truth Team 360 to make sure today's promising gains are not lost tomorrow. Show your commitment to our future by visiting pointofview.net/team or call 800-347-5151. Ask to join the Truth Team. Pointofview.net/team and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Weekend edition, and we have in studio with us today, and that's one of the reasons why you might want to watch the program as well as listen to it. You, of course, can go to our website, pointofview.net, and watch it.
Kind of a party in here today.
It certainly is. Or Facebook Live, you can watch that as well, even leave a comment. So Penna Dexter here, of course, Kelly Shackelford, and now Lathan Watts has joined us as well. He's been with Ken Hagee, and we're going to talk about that in just a minute, but Kelly, I got to talk about football. Yesterday, we had Tony Dungy and his wife here, and Tony and Lauren Dungy are just wonderful individuals, and so we were talking about coaches that get criticized, and he's been receiving a fair amount of criticism himself, but out of the blue, he said, I had posted a number of things on my Twitter account and others about how, as a fellow Christian coach, I really appreciate Coach Joe Kennedy. And I'm kind of horrified that you have to go all the way to the Supreme Court to give him some of his freedom that he deserves.
I think it's great, the coaches that have come out in favor of Coach Kennedy.
Bobby Bowden's another one.
Bobby Bowden. Coach Dungy did it way back, too. He, I think, tweeted way back. And in fact, the first two really major people to tweet in favor of Coach Kennedy was Tony Dungy and a candidate by the name of Donald Trump.
Yeah. I do remember that.
So it's kind of funny, but the coaches are really, I think, coming behind Coach Kennedy now, and I do appreciate people like Tony Dungy that are willing to stand up and stand with him. I thought it was really neat when Bobby Bowden, Coach Bowden, was on TV with Coach Kennedy.
And that's on your website in case
it
people
is.
want to watch
In fact,
that.
there's a funny one because Jeremy from our staff, he was the proverbial potted plant.
He said zero
He didn't
words.
say they didn't ask him a question because it was too good. Yeah. Bobby Bowden was talking about his faith and coaching, and then you had Coach Kennedy sitting about this, and he was like, "I'm just a high school coach, and Bobby Bowden is here, and so it was fun to watch a hero standing next to a guy who is also a hero in many ways and was coming to his support, and it's a neat thing. I'd encourage people to watch about it. They can go to firstliberty.org and find it, or I think there might be a link on Point of View.
This one at Point of View as well. And that brings me to one of the issues. We said a couple of weeks ago, we just knew this was going to happen, that you're going to have various football camps, you're going to have pastors coming in, they're going to share a Bible verse, and in this particular case, it's a pastor in Arkansas. And we just knew this. Just as we know the sun's going to come up on the east, we just knew that there's going to be somebody who's going to get in trouble, and I put that in air quotes, from our Freedom from Religion Foundation or some of the other groups who just have a problem with the fact that when you gather a bunch of guys together and talk to them and motivate them, just mentioning a scripture verse was a problem. And so we got this article from The Blaze, which, again, is on your website as well, First Liberty.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. This is Connor McKay, who was there, and he was giving a talk to the boys on sort of character and courage and these types of things. And the scripture, let's be clear. The scripture he used wasn't, John 3:16, okay? It was as iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. There's nothing, problematic about that. It wasn't a religious, it's just a concept. It's bizarre that the Freedom from Religion, violation, he's mentioned scripture. It's like, so what? You can mention all kinds of literature. Guess what, Freedom from Religion? There are Bibles in libraries of schools all across the country. And guess what? The Supreme Court said, if you don't have a Bible, you're probably not a very good school because it's the most read book. It's used throughout Shakespeare and everywhere else. So, the idea that you can't mention scripture is just bizarre. I will say nice things about the school because instead of like freaking out and going, oh my gosh, we've got to put some masking tape over the mouth of the speaker. they didn't do that. They kind of did what you should do with the Freedom from Religion Foundation. You get a letter from them, you throw it in the trash. You hear something from them, you go, well, that's not right. You deal with what the law really is. And so they didn't. They realized there's no problem with what happened here, and so this is all.
So they did not take steps to ensure they would not promote religion in the future through their athletic programs, which they were asked to do,
which would be a violation.
Yes.
I mean, if they came in and said, by the way, any of you who ever are Christian, well, you're not allowed to speak to the boys, or you're a pastor, you're not allowed to speak to the boys, even if you're not speaking to them about a faith subject. So. People need to understand you can quote the Bible, you can talk about these things, you can talk about character. Those are all fine, but just more of the same. More the attempt to try to censor free speech and religious expression. And in this case, it really wasn't religious expression. It was as iron sharpens iron, which I think a lot of people know.
It's wisdom.
Yeah, it's just basic truth. And it applies to everybody, whether they believe in God or don't.
Well, FFRF has never let the truth get in the way of a good argument. So, I mean, when you have an organization that's as small as they are, that sends out the volume of letters that they do, it makes logical sense. It is that they are using basically a template, a form letter. Anytime they hear something that resembles something, they're going to fire off that letter, and they're not going to let the facts get in the way. The fact is that Connor McKay was a former player invited by his coach, and Connor McKay's 21 years old. I mean, he's not much older than these kids that he's talking to. That's why they wanted him there.
Yeah,
because he had been where they had been, and he was there to talk about teamwork and leadership and shock a guy who happens to be a pastor, and he's quotes a scripture in his speech. I mean, is anybody surprised?
Yeah.
But like Kelly said, FFRF, gets the vapors and fires off a letter because
the vapors.
And accuses them of proselytizing these kids in this captive audience.
Yeah.
I always thought that's interesting. What does proselytize mean? Proselytize means to persuade others to your opinion.
Right.
So I always thought it was interesting that, the founders would never want to protect that type of speech.
Oh,
I mean, that's the whole point of free speech is you try to, and in this case, his opinion was character. Yeah. He was trying to actually convince them to have good character. That's why they invited him. So it's incredible. It really is. But the message of this whole story is, you've got to be willing to stand up, or these things will be taken away from you in your community.
Yeah.
Everybody who's listening, this kind of stuff is coming to your community, and
that's why we do these programs.
Will your officials at your school, will your school board members, will they run for cover, or will they stand? Because if they stand, they'll win. The law's on our side, but not everybody's willing to take a knee like Coach Kennedy when they're told they're going to be fired if they go to a knee and pray.
Well, as a matter of fact, I think the default for school officials is to capitulate because there's such a fear factor there. And that's why I like it when, first of all, the school system here is a very good example because they threw the letter in the trash. But also the fact that, that now it's being publicized and that you've come to their side to show people across the country that, you can get help and support, and you can get the legal expert to say what your rights are, and then, stand up. Don't capitulate. Even if it's inconvenient, just stand up.
And like you mentioned, Kerby, this case is on our website and is linked at pointofview.net. You can go there and get the link if you want to see the story of what happened, what was said, the news articles that were written, and a lot of other stuff. I know we might talk about some of these others later. I mean, there are crazy things going on these days. As you mentioned, Lathan just came back from one of our newest clients, which is an 80-year-old couple who they're trying to evict from their apartment because they held a Bible study. You think that, okay, there's more facts to that. No. That is it. Yeah. They were first banned from having any sort of religious activity at all in the common area, the room that people could use. But that wasn't good enough. Bible study is now banned, in their apartment. So stuff is really happening, and people need to be able to see this, know what their rights are, and stand up to make sure that it doesn't happen in their community.
Well, Lathan, when we come back from the break, I want to have you maybe tell us a little bit more about this. And one of the things I've done every once in a while with you and even with Jeremy the last time we were there is people do wonder, am I missing something? You can't really believe that somebody told a woman in her own home she couldn't pray. There must be something else to this fact. There must be something else to force a community realty company to say to a retired Lutheran minister, you can't have a Bible study here. So we're going to come back and get a little bit better understanding of what that family is like and who they are. And as you will find out, that is just, again, one of those stories. Kelly and I say, you just can't make some of this up. We'll be back right after this.
Clinton gives legal abortion credit for boosting the American economy. Speaking at a Planned Parenthood-sponsored rally opposing the confirmation of Brett Kavanaugh to the U.S. Supreme Court, she attempted to help her audience of abortion activists add financial persuasion to their arsenal of arguments for abortion rights. Ms. Clinton stated, American women entering the labor force from 1973 to 2009 added $3.5 trillion to our economy, right? Actually, the 60-plus million abortions that have taken place since the Roe v. Wade decision have constituted a huge drag on our economy. In 1998, the late Larry Burkett, a highly regarded financial expert, argued that, quote, it is largely because of abortion on demand that by the year 2030, the ratio of workers to Social Security beneficiaries will be reduced to only 2 to 1. 2 workers will be supporting 1 retiree. When the program began in the 1930s, 42 workers supported each retiree. Dennis Howard spent 30 years as a market researcher and consultant for major corporations. He is currently president of the pro-life group Movement for a Better America. He has researched the economic impact of abortion since 1995, using data from Planned Parenthood's own Alan Guttmacher Institute and gross domestic product per capita. He argues that the loss of lives due to abortion provides a cumulative drag on GDP that will keep growing no matter what. Because of the echo effect, he writes, 61.4 million missing births in one generation automatically means 61 million fewer births than the next. Those are workers we need right now. And tax revenues. If Chelsea Clinton's utilitarian economic case for abortion were correct, she would be presenting a stark moral choice between money and human lives. The reality is, abortion has not only eroded our workforce, it is shrinking the voter base, mostly in blue states. Arguing for abortion makes for bad economics and bad politics. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back once again in studio with us today, Penna Dexter, Kelly Shackelford, and Lathan Watts, and we are talking now about one of the other articles that we have posted on the website. And again, I want you to really sit back and listen for a few minutes because, Lathan, you've had a chance to meet Ken and his wife, Liv, and they're in this particular, what you might call, facility that is run by an organization called Community Realty Company. And they stated that the Bible study that he leads is a business activity and violates the lease. So tell me a little bit about what they're like, because, again, people say, I can't imagine that's controversial, but apparently it is.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things, sometimes you almost have to laugh to keep from crying. I mean, every time we get a new case, it never ceases to amaze me, some of the things that are going on. But I mean, the Haugies are great people. They're the type of people that you would want to have for your neighbors. You know, I mean, he's a retiree. They're both retirees. This apartment complex they live in is, for senior citizens. And I believe they moved in there back in early 2017. So some of the residents, some of the other people that live there were interested in forming a Bible study. And when the Haugies moved in and they found out that he's a retired Lutheran minister, the other residents were, sort of excited. We finally have somebody that can maybe lead this, and they asked him to, and of course, he was more than happy to. So they did what everyone else in that community does. If you want to host a meeting, they went and reserved the community room, and they were initially told, well, you can do that as long as you call it like a book review, like a version of Oprah's book club or something.
Bible is
I guess, they thought seeing the word Bible study on the community room sign-up sheet was going to hurt someone's feelings or offend somebody. Then they basically, the management of the company issued new rules on use of the community room and banned all religious use. So not just a Bible study. 2 or 3 residents wanted to meet there and pray over something. I mean, any and all religious activity. So when that happened, one of the members of the Bible study volunteered her apartment. And so they attempted to do that. And this letter from Community Realty Company, or CRC, the management, saying that they have that this is somehow commercial activity. I asked him, I was like, well, did you have like a velvet rope in front of the door? And like, what did they even hang their hat on calling this commercial activity? And he laughed. He's like, no, I mean, I was just, doing what I do. You're doing what I was asked to do. So, they're now earned, but that's how they became our clients. We've now contacted the management company, instructed them in the Fair Housing Act and lots of other things.
Yeah, the Fair Housing Act alone would be
exactly
right.
And so we're now waiting on a response from the management of the company, but I don't know if it's just a fundamental misunderstanding of the Fair Housing Act. I think because we've seen this in other.
That's a big misunderstanding.
In
We're
other
talking about
residential
evicting
facilities.
these people, right?
Right.
I mean, they could get evicted for a Bible study.
I think
or
they
am I
somehow.
overplaying it?
No, I mean that's the letter that he got said if he continued to do this, it would.
All right.
Would
Just want
they
to
would
put that
serve
on
him
the
with an
table
eviction
for people
notice.
to hear
I mean,
that.
this is a real threat of eviction. They somehow, either their attorney or somebody in management, somehow there, I think, is this myth that if you discriminate against all religions equally, that that somehow that's okay. That because we banned all religious activity and we didn't target you as a Lutheran, Mr. Haugie, or as a no Baptist hymnals, or something like that, that it's somehow fine because it is equal discrimination against all religions. But that is,
that is amazing. What it is.
Antithesis of what this country is founded on, obviously, and so we're looking forward to resolving this in their favor, by whatever means necessary. Hopefully, the realty company will take our advice to heart and respond properly. If not, then we'll pursue other avenues to get this taken care of.
Yeah, notice this is 2 of these we've had pretty.
Yeah, you had the one in Fort Charlotte, right?
Yeah, we had
Donna Dunbar,
where they had the big, the sign that people couldn't even believe. They thought you must have printed that sign and put it on the, it was like the best piece of evidence you've ever been given by, one of your opponent. For those who don't know, the sign said, all Christian music is banned.
Any and all Christian music
is banned. And that was on the piano. Yeah. So you could play the piano.
But no Christian.
But not
no
Christian
hymns.
music. And, that's not discrimination. And now it's like, can you meet in people's apartments? Yes. But if you hold a Bible study.
Oh, boy.
You're in big trouble. Yeah. And if you hold a meeting in the common area, You can do a book review, but not a Bible review.
Exactly.
I mean,
Yeah.
hello.
Yeah, they should. If they're going to do that, they ought to at least change the name of the room, because it's obviously no longer a community room. If the entire community is not able to use it.
You know, when we look at these cases, I mean, it's outrageous and it's a violation of religious liberty, but I'm thinking about it from the view of someone who has a parent in a senior home, and a lot of the people in these places don't drive. They cannot go to
There
a
you go.
Bible study
It's
somewhere.
almost like our synagogue cases, too. They can't drive. Yeah, go
Yeah,
ahead.
so
Yeah.
you could see why these
Sure.
people it was sort of like pent-up demand. They were waiting for somebody who would lead a Bible study, and when he came, they organized quickly, and they went ahead and did it, because people, think about, you're 80, you're not that many more years on this earth. You've been raised in the faith. You want to grow in the Lord. You want to get closer to God, and there aren't as many opportunities. And so to take that option away from people and only let them have a book club, and probably if they studied a book that mentioned Christ, you'd have somebody complaining. So it affects the things that you guys do. That's what strikes me, is that, I mean, these are lawyers and they're doing their jobs professionally and very well, but this affects people's lives in deep, deep ways, their personal lives. And so it makes it, I think, in a sense, very personal when you think about that. If you know someone that lives in one of those places,
Well, that
they would be banned
scenario
with
is
that.
precisely accurate in what's going on in Fredericksburg. I was there yesterday, and I met some of the people, and 2 or 3 of them told me, I can't get out. I can't go to worship. This is my only opportunity to do this. And so they are taking away the only chance that I have to meet with other Christians. This is it. And, the only chance I have to study the Bible, to have any sort of religious exercise, was this Bible study, and now it's gone.
Yeah, and it doesn't mean that everyone that lives in the place has to participate.
No, of course not.
But you've got, what did you say, 40 people?
I met yesterday with some of the folks that were involved with it. I don't think that I met everyone there, but I think it's probably somewhere between 15 and 30.
Well, that's a substantial number.
Right.
Yeah, and I think of the irony of who is in charge. Who did President Trump put in charge of housing and urban development? It's Ben Carson. And I'm like, I wonder what he would think about whether it's okay to have a Bible study in your own home.
I think we know the answer to that one, don't we?
So that's
He may get the opportunity to weigh in on it.
He might if as far as a guy like that who actually understands religious freedom. In fact, I think one of his entrees to the campaign was being attacked for his faith by candidate Trump. So, and he's holding Bible studies in the cabinet right now. So I think he understands the ability to hold a Bible study.
Again, those articles are on our website, the second one on Ken Hauge, and then the third one on quoting Scripture at a football camp. We have a lot more to cover, and we'll do that right after these important messages.
It wasn't long ago, it seemed, every official decision brought religious liberty and our ability to live as faithful Christians into question. Some of us wondered how long it would be before we were literally forced to choose between obeying God or men. That pressure seems to have subsided just a bit, and now is the time not to take a breath, but to work as hard as we can for the future of our nation. Thanks to you, Point of View is doing just that. And our special thanks to those who have become members of Truth Team 360. In football, 22 guys battle it out on the field while 40 or 60,000 watch in the stands, and perhaps hundreds of thousands more watch on television. We need a special few to get out of the seats and into the game. Join today by calling 1-800-347-5151 and ask to join the Truth Team, or visit us online at pointofview.net/team. We really do need you. The nation needs you. 800-347-5151 and pointofview.net/team. Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kerby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of View, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging. Apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining us. Today it is our weekend edition, an opportunity to look at a number of very important issues in the news. A little bit later we might circle back to some things we've talked about before, religious liberty cases and Paul Manafort and Michael Cohen, but I did want to look a little bit at elections as well as we start this hour. And if you have some comments or questions, feel free to give us a call, 1-800-351-1212. Penna Dexter, Kelly Shackelford, and Lathan Watts with us as well. And I'm looking forward to getting Lathan some comments as well, as an individual that has served not only on First Liberty staff, but in the past with Congressman Jeb Hensarling, as well as Senator John Cornyn and Texas Governor Rick Perry. So, Penna Dexter, one of the articles we've posted here, CBS News pollster, I don't think we'll see a blue wave. And a lot of people are starting to say, okay, it's getting closer to Labor Day, and because of that, people start paying attention a little bit more. And what Matt Vespa says is, we've been hearing it for months. A blue wave is coming. The Democrats are going to retake the House. The Democratic ballot advantage is significant. But if you go down a little bit further, there are individuals, in this case, CBS News, their pollsters and others, that are a lot more bearish about the prospect of a blue wave. Will Democrats take control of the House? What's your thoughts?
Well, you know, first of all, the point that you made about Labor Day is a good one, because most people in the country don't pay that much attention yet, like we do. We're kind of wonky here, and we start talking about it, 2 years ahead, right after the last election. But that's different. And, you have a national poll that says the Democrats have an advantage in Congress, but that means nothing. The polls that matter are the individual elections around the country. So you have to look at those areas. And most of the time, and this is what their pollster at CBS found, was that most seats are not going to change parties. Very few are. And so, that's interesting, I think, because the Republicans hold the House. Now, certainly there's going to be some changes toward the Democrats in the House, because there's just that Trump hatred out there, and that's going to work in some places. But I think there's some other factors at play, and one of them is that the Democrats have gone so far to the left. And there's another piece that, I don't know if you guys have read this, but it's by a guy named Jeff Wallius. It was in the Daily Signal today and other places. Democrats are leaving their party in droves. Conservatives should pay attention. Actually, conservatives should capitalize on the fact that a lot of Democrats see it as way too far to the left. They don't want to see the tax cuts reversed. They don't want to see Medicare for all. They're worried about some of the social issues, for instance. But there are even people who have these leftist interest groups, but they don't want to see the whole party go, socialist. So we, as the Republicans, the conservatives across the country, even the independents, need to look at some of these people and try to, woo them to their side. So, we don't know what's going to happen in the election. I think what it is it's close. And so people need to, if they care about it, they need to get involved.
I think, if you look at it, it's definitely stacked to do what most midterm elections do, if not a little more so, because of the extra hatred of Trump. I mean, it's the party out of power usually shows up. The party in power feels a little better. They don't show up as much. And I think that's kind of on steroids right now. I mean, and the example, if you remember that Ohio special election.
There you go, 87% to 40% or something like that.
87% if you look at the presidential and who turned out, Democrat, Republican, 87% of the Democrats who turned out for the presidential turned out for that special election. 40% of the Republicans turned out. Now,
in a ruby red district.
Exactly.
Right?
And so that's the danger. And so I think absent something pretty significant in the House, you would think that the Democrats would pick up a number of seats. We just don't know yet. Number one, like Penna says, people don't pay attention until after Labor Day. So who knows? The way this cycle goes, I mean, things change every day. Who knows? But I will say this. I think this obsession with impeachment and it becoming more of a real thing that not just a couple of people are talking about, I think the Republicans look at it and go, that's just ridiculous. Okay, you're just trying to overturn the election. There's no impeachment. There's no high crime and misdemeanor. There's no treason. This is silly.
I think a lot of Democrats don't really like it either.
They don't like it because that will turn out Republicans. I mean, if people really, and independents, if you're an independent and you think of the next 2 years being spent with the House doing impeachment and all, I mean, which is going to be a waste of time because it's not going to go anywhere in the Senate anyway. Right. But it's going to totally clog up our government. Nothing's going to get done. I think most people don't want to see the House doing that for the next 2 years. I think most people would say, you know what, if you want to get rid of Trump, get your candidates ready, show you can do a good job, and beat him 2 years from now. But I think that will really hurt with independents, and I think it will cause turnout amongst the Republicans. So when it comes to the House, I think everything's should lean against the Republicans, but there are some countervailing forces that are starting to come into play. The Senate, to me, is the most important.
Yeah, I'm going to get back to that
because that's where all the judges get confirmed and all that, and that's leaning Republican.
We'll talk about Mitch McConnell in just a minute, but Lathan, I want to come to you. You've been involved in some of these campaigns, and again, trying to read the tea leaves at this early stage is not easy, but any thoughts about this?
Well, sure. I mean, there's an old saying in politics, there's only two ways to run your campaign. If you're not running scared, you're running behind.
Right.
And so every member of Congress right now should, take this threat of a blue wave very seriously. Now, as Kelly mentioned, traditionally in an off-year election, the party out of power picks up seats. There are, a couple of notable exceptions during George W. Bush's term, but trying to predict what's going to happen right in this environment right now is just it's a fool's errand. I mean, Donald Trump has defied predictions from the first day he walked down that escalator and announced he was running for president. And I do think, though, one factor that is in the Democrats' favor is also the large number of incumbent Republicans that retired. And so there are actually a lot of open seats where you don't have an incumbent running for re-election in a safe seat. You have an open seat, so it's a new name or face in that Republican district running against a Democrat. So there's a lot of factors at play here. But Donald Trump was elected by people that the Democrat Party has ignored for decades. That's why he won.
Yeah.
And you combine their feeling ignored, that blue collar worker in Michigan or Wisconsin, Indiana, Ohio, those folks that turned out in droves for him, and despite all the attempts so far to drive a wedge between Trump and his supporters, have stuck with him. I think Kelly's right. I think they understand what will happen if the Democrats take control of the House, and I think they're going to be a factor in those close races. Close races is all about turning out your voters.
Certainly is. We come back. Penna put something on the table, and that is, are there some voters that are going to say, I don't know, single-payer plan like Medicare for all, free college tuition, guaranteed basic income, abolishing ICE, a $15 an hour minimum wage? So I want to vote for somebody like that. Yeah, that's another issue. We'll talk about that right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
No doubt when you were growing up, some adult admonished you to say what you mean and mean what you say. That advice should be spread far and wide when politicians, commentators, and others use words and phrases without any precision. When the New York Times hired Sarah Jeong, critics pointed to all of her tweets and verbal attacks on white people and law enforcement. J.J. McCullough, in a recent commentary, reminds us that one of the defenses of her horrible statements was that all of this was done satirically and hyperbolically. Well, using extreme language and hyperbole may get you hired at the New York Times, but it won't work in the real world. While taking a tour of the White House, say you wish you could kill the president. See how that works out for you. While you're in a police station, say that you wish all the cops would die. I doubt you'd get a linguistic pass for that statement. And the term fake news used to be applied to websites, like The Onion, that use satire to make a political point. Today, the term has been so overused that it's almost meaningless. For most people today, the term fake news is used to describe a story or a news organization they dislike. And while we're talking about hyperbole and fake news, we need to mention the president's tweets. Some of his defenders try to defend his indefensible comments by saying we shouldn't always take what he writes literally. No, we should take the words and actions of a president seriously. We also have heard the term deep state used indiscriminately. It used to mean a nefarious group of insiders in a foreign government. Today, it's often used to describe some federal bureaucrat you don't like and don't trust. These are just a few examples of why our elders told us to say what you mean and mean what you say. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kerby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back once again, if you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Penna, you know that sometimes when Kelly's in here, he says, now I can tell you something, but I can't tell everybody. But we have an announcement we're going to make in just a minute, because I guess we can tell some people about what happened to Chaplain Scott Squires and the assistant chaplain in just a minute. But just
it's breaking news.
It is breaking news, so we're going to get that press release up on the website so people can read it in just a minute. But let me go around the round table for just a minute, because I did raise the question, or Penna, I think, would be the better person to have said, raise the question. You did. That when indeed people say, well, the Republicans have become more conservative and the Democrats have become more liberal, I can look at some of these party platforms that even Kelly Shackelford was involved in years ago, and the Republican platform looks pretty much the same. So I don't know that they've changed a lot, but I would suggest to you that a lot of things that were outliers just a few years ago, things that only Senator Bernie Sanders was talking about, now are almost becoming kind of mainstream in the Democratic Party. And is that kind of the argument that you're making?
They're, I don't know if they're mainstream, but they're being taken up in a high-profile way.
Yeah.
I would love to know how many Democrats in middle America really think that we should have, a guaranteed income for everyone. I mean, it sounds great, but I think most people are smart enough to know how in the world you ever pay for it. I mean, some of the social issues that the Democrats were for, they're gone. But they're still in the Republican platform. The platform hasn't changed, for instance, on marriage and things like that. Abolishing ICE, that's pretty radical. That is a very radical position that's being taken by some high-profile politicians in the Democrat Party. So when they're able to control the conversation like that, I think that hurts. And I think what the right can do on this is, first of all, talk about who's going to be Speaker of the House. in the are they going to have an 80-year-old person? I mean, that looks like who will be speaker will be Nancy Pelosi again. And, the Democrats argue over whether she's too liberal or too conservative. But I think what the right needs to do is pass good legislation now while they still can before the election. Something good, perhaps like it was suggested by this one guy that I read, something about work requirements for food stamps, something that's not really, it's kind of common sense. And then work on the border, because that's a very popular issue and will draw votes. Just work on the wall or make some progress in that area. And then continue to tout the economic progress.
Yeah, I think it'd be fascinating, like you said, to actually poll the Democrats on a number of these things. How many want to abolish ICE? Because you've got very high profile. I mean, Gillibrand and Kamala Harris, and I mean, these are
Cory Booker.
These are some of these considered the top contenders for their next presidential run. So obviously, it's a significant part of the base. I don't know if it's 50% or 40% or whatever. And the same thing on impeachment. I think that would be even higher. And I just think it would be interesting because, I mean, I could see a commercial right now if you're running in a district and you nationalize the election, which Republicans usually don't do well, it seems like, in the congressional races unless they nationalize it. Because if it's local, it's who can bring you more goodies, right? Which usually benefits.
Contract with America, 1994, good example. Yep. Yeah. Okay.
And so here's what I see the commercial. I see all these Democrats, and a number of them has said it, saying impeachment. I would just have them just say impeachment. I would grab the part of their clip where it says impeachment, 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 and show that commercial and say, if you want the next 2 years to be spent in the House wasting everybody's time talking about this, knowing it's not going to go anywhere in the Senate, not getting anything done for the American people, and having Nancy Pelosi as your next speaker, then vote for this candidate, here. Because I think most people don't want that. But you can also say, if you want to get rid of the tax cuts, if you, you could go down the list. I mean, they're not proposing anything specifically. The only really specific things they're proposing is what not all of them are proposing, as Penna said, but a percentage. It's pretty radical stuff. A guaranteed living wage, okay, that every American gets a wage from the government no matter what. Most Americans don't like that. So what's the platform? Again, I think I think the smarter ones are trying to make it about health care, but that message is not really coming out. This is about impeachment, and it's about these big sort of socialism issues like guaranteed minimum wage, the Medicare, the single payer, which would bankrupt Medicare. I mean, how was it? $37 trillion. The number was so big, it was hard.
$32.6 trillion more. More.
I mean, we're dead. We're over. So I think those are the things. So, but it'll be fascinating to me what kind of campaigns are being run by the Republicans against this. There's so many sort of choices. There's the sort of, let's look at what we've done versus, do you just want to sort of, oppose for the next 2 years? I forget what the words they're using. But it's, do you do that? Do you focus on these extreme issues like impeachment and all that? I don't know. I'm sure they will test things and see what's kind of, getting a better response. But again, every advantage is with the Democrats in this off-year election. If they don't pick up a large number of seats in the House, then they will have squandered what really is normally a good opportunity, and with the energy they have, I think even a better opportunity than usual.
Lathan, one of the things I would talk also about is, what can the president do? We talked about abolish ICE. The other day, the president and the vice president had ICE agents in the White House and honored them. So again, people say, one individual says, we appreciate these people doing their job as law enforcement. The others say, we just want to get rid of the entire agency. I think that resonates with some people, don't you think?
Definitely. I mean, he ran for president. He said, I'm the law and order candidate.
Yeah.
And made that contrast with the Democratic Party. I think some of what you may be seeing within the Democratic Party is also a generational shift in the Democratic Party.
Very true.
the young lady Ocasio-Cortez, who's kind of the new face of the Democratic Party, and this new brand, they call it democratic socialism. They just add a term to it and own it. I think I've said on here before, Kirby, John Kennedy could not get elected as a Democrat.
That's right. I don't think Bill Clinton could either. Yeah.
No, not the Clinton that ran in
92
during the early 90s. And I think what you're seeing is the result of a very, very liberal establishment in our colleges and universities, because my parents' generation, and certainly my grandparents' generation, you would, even if you believed in socialism, you wouldn't own up to it as a candidate. I mean, you would call it something else.
Yeah.
You wouldn't dare be labeled as a socialist, because it
was pejorative then.
It was.
Now
it
they're
absolutely
using it
was.
as they're proud of it.
And they knew socialism is just, the starter kit for communism. And the people that lived through the Cold War, when it was a real threat, in the 50s, the 60s, and then on into, the 70s and 80s with, Ronald Reagan and the evil empire and the wall finally coming down. I think what you're seeing is people that didn't live through that, they don't identify socialism as a negative. They've been told that this is a good idea. It's just never really been implemented the right way. That's what they've probably heard most of their formal education, depending on where they've gone to school. So they don't run away from the socialist label. They embrace it, and this, I think it has radically shifted even in the last, 5-10 years. Bernie Sanders used to be the crazy guy up in the balcony, the character from the Muppets for the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
Well, if they hadn't fixed the election in their own primary and tried to rig it for Hillary Clinton, he would have been their nominee.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, they're dealing with right now, how to deal with their superdelegates. They're
thing.
trying to figure that out for the future.
Kelly said something, and again, I'll say it back to you, and you can see if you still agree with it, but this is a generation, the millennial generation, has really never seen capitalism work. They have seen, ever since 2008, a down economy. But now it's kind of blowing and going. I mean, every number I've looked at, and I've looked at a couple of these economic numbers, and I don't claim to know as much about economics as Ocasio-Cortez.
You know a lot more.
But we have enormous number of vacant jobs, open jobs, and they're seeing the economy going and wages rising, things like that. You've made the case that this might be the first time that it could be a learning experience for some of these.
It could, and
millennials.
you just wonder: do they learn? Do they see this, and
do they pick up on it,
or do they
think that's just socialism?
This is just the result of? Oh no, this economy is actually booming because you hear people say this because Barack Obama laid the foundation. You're like, it's amazing how that foundation really took off right after the election and after the tax cuts and after the reduction of regulation on businesses and all the stuff that happened. You hope that people do learn, but I do think this is the first chance they've had to see capitalism and the free market, free in action right now.
We're going to talk about Chaplain Scott Squires and Casey Griffin right after this.
There is no more dangerous time than when things are going well. Remember Elijah on Mount Carmel? Fire came down. There was no doubt who was God, but what happened next? He went from amazing faith to a time of great fear and depression. Many Christians have been very thankful a certain Democratic candidate for president was not the one to nominate two replacements for the Supreme Court. But as with Elijah, times of great victory are also times of great danger. Moments like this are not the time to take it easy. This is not the time to let our guard down. This is a time to double down on our work in the community, to serve and pray and plan and invest in a better future. This is the time to join Point of View's Truth Team 360 to make sure today's promising gains are not lost tomorrow. Show your commitment to our future by visiting pointofview.net/team or call 800-347-5151. Ask to join the Truth Team. Pointofview.net/team and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Weekend edition. If you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Matter of fact, we're going to be talking about the military for just a minute, so I'd love to hear from any of you that have served in the military, because I think you're going to be encouraged by this. Penna Dexter, you know, one of the things I love about live radio, you've been part of this for, as we both have, for decades, and sometimes something comes down and we can announce it here. So people literally will be hearing this for the first time, right?
Yeah, the press release came in, and Kelly and Lathan both got word that there was a favorable resolution to an important case. I'm not going to describe it because we have the two experts here.
Yes. Well, again, you might remember the story about Chaplain Scott Squires and then the associate or assistant chaplain, Casey Griffin. So, Kelly, do us the honors. We have posted the press release. They can go to First Liberty, but it's also there right now at pointofview.net.
Yeah, this is good news. It's an outrageous case. It's really, I don't know why. I mean, a lot of cases kind of can get under your skin. This one really made me angry because Chaplain Squires is a guy who was awarded the Bronze Star. He was awarded the Meritorious Service Award 5 different times. I mean, just a tremendous individual. And serving our country as a chaplain. And the way things work for chaplains, if people don't know, is they have to have an endorsing group, which is essentially their denomination. And they have the Army regulations require that they follow the beliefs of their endorsing groups. If not, they will lose their chaplaincy. And so it's not surprising that Southern Baptist chaplains would say, well, I can't marry 2 women or 2 men, and I can't counsel them towards marriage. And so what are they supposed to do? Well, what it says is they're supposed to do, if somebody comes to them, they're supposed to say, well, look, my beliefs and the beliefs of my denomination don't allow me to do this, but I'm happy to refer you to a chaplain who doesn't have the same restrictions that I do. And that's what happened in this case. You had 2 women that came and said, we want to be a part of your counseling. And he said, I can't do that, but let me find somebody. He found somebody, another chaplain, and referred them. You think that's great, right? All over. No, they complained. And the next thing you know, Chaplain Squires, the determination was not only against him, although he followed every regulation he was supposed to follow, but he was held in dereliction of duty.
I know that was added later, right?
That's court-martial.
Yes, I know.
Go to jail.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about a chaplain for following his faith, following his denominations, following the Army regulations. Now, that was, I thought, horrible. And then it got worse. You go, well, how can it get worse? His assistant, Casey Griffin, this is a wonderful African-American woman who actually qualified through this program where she actually, because of her service and everything she was doing, she was going to be able to get her college covered. Well, she was held in violation too. Well, what did she do? Well, they came to her, this couple, first and said, hey, we'd like to be a part of this counseling with the chaplain. And she said, oh, let me go check with the chaplain. That's all she did. She did her job to go get the chaplain, to connect the chaplain to them. And they were not only ruling against her, but her college was being taken away. So we had dereliction of duty, court-martial, all this against the chaplain, ruining the assistant chaplain and her college. For what reason? For no reason except for religious discrimination. The good news is we actually have a victory today because we appealed that and said that, look, the law is all on the chaplain's side and the chaplain's assistant side. And today we won on all counts. Everything was reversed. The outrageous dereliction of duty charge among those. But I'll just read you a quote, first from Chaplain Squires. I look forward to being able to focus on continuing my career serving my fellow soldiers. I am eternally grateful to First Liberty for covering my 6, meaning his back, and fighting to restore my religious liberty. Mike Berry, our Deputy General Counsel and Director of Military Affairs, said, we're grateful to the Army that they've rejected and abandoned these baseless charges. The United States military is no place for anti-religious hostility against its own military chaplains. Chaplains like Scott Squires and Assistant Casey Griffin do not have to give up their First Amendment rights in order to serve their fellow soldiers. I mean, this is one of those things. We're having to do all these chaplain cases because some people really want to get rid of our chaplains, and they want to attack them when they live out their faith and actually stand and do what they're supposed to do. In this case, we got a good result, and so that's a great day. And I would encourage people, grab this from Point of View or from First Liberty and share this with other people. Number one, I think people need to know what some of our soldiers are having to go through for their faith. But number two, that we can win if we're willing to stand up.
You know, the Trump administration has been issuing directives and reversing policies throughout the administration and throughout the government about religious liberty, and that's been a really good thing. I know you've been to Washington to talk about some of that, yes. But it doesn't seem like either the military is just slower to turn around because it's so big and such a bureaucracy, but it doesn't seem like that message has gotten down very deep into the military.
As we've said, for some reason, General Mattis doesn't seem to have the memo. And that memo did go from the Attorney General to all of the departments, all the agencies, including the military. But I think there's a deep state. There are people who were there before this administration that are carrying this type of thing out. And it really does need to be cleaned up. I mean, look, those who serve us are already making sacrifice. The idea that you would take away their religious freedom, which, by the way, is one of the first things that General Washington put in place, because he understood that when you serve, you need to be able to rely upon your faith, to rest upon your faith. That's why we have chaplains. And so to attack those for exercising their faith, or to try to get rid of the chaplains and to destroy chaplains and their careers, would be devastating to our military. We had a brief filed in the Supreme Court about a year or so ago by a number of generals in one of our cases, and they said in their brief the number one reason they found that most people actually, came into serve in the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the Marines, etc., was their faith. That was their number one reason. And so the idea that you would take away that from them, it's ridiculous. They don't have to sacrifice their First Amendment religious freedoms. They have a right to live out their faith, and chaplains have a right to be chaplains, good chaplains that follow their faith.
Again, I'm at the First Liberty a website, and they had Chaplain Scott Squires and Casey Griffin, and it said fighting, and now it just flipped over to win. And Lathan, this is a good win. I don't think we can underemphasize how important this is, not just for Scott Squires, but for other chaplains who might find themselves in the same situation.
Absolutely, and not just the chaplains, but all the members of the armed services. This was a direct impact to this chaplain. We've had other chaplain cases, but as Kelly referred, and as our Director of Military Affairs in the articles, you don't have to give up your rights in order to serve in the United States military. And that's the first duty of government, is to defend the God-given rights of the people. And like Kelly said, General Washington established the chaplaincy corps. There were chaplains in the Army before it was the U.S. Army, when it was the Continental Army.
Very true.
And this is a part of what has made America great for 200 years, over 200 years. And just like Kelly said, it's like, this president has issued directives to every level of the government to protect religious liberty. And nowhere should that be a higher priority than the military, the people who are charged with protecting all of our liberties. And it's just like somebody didn't get the memo. And there is a bureaucracy within the military. I think most people have an image in their mind when you just mention the military, and you think of guys on the battlefield, and
right.
But there is certainly a bureaucracy, and like any bureaucracy, some people rise through the ranks in a political way, and I think a lot of these policies that have impacted chaplains and others in the military are a social engineering throughout the military that has gone on far too long, and in my personal opinion, makes our military less effective when you have to deal with this sort of nonsense. And it's high time that it was rooted out and eliminated, so that the military can be as effective and efficient as it possibly can be.
That's really true, that the military, because it's you have to obey authority, it's authoritarian in nature, it has been used for the last several decades for social engineering, and they've made a lot of quote-unquote progress. And so I guess, I always thought, well, once we get an administration that's really going to have a different position on things, it will turn around, but it doesn't turn around quickly. And you have a lot of people in there who have gotten where they are because they've towed the line. They've towed the politically correct line, and they're there. They're generals.
Exactly. And once this case really got attention and started to possibly impact that general's career, I knew that this would get resolved in our favor.
Yes.
And it did.
Okay.
Well, again, let's give credit also, not only to First Liberty, to Michael Berry. It's certainly
Semper
a great
Fi, Mike.
opportunity. Yeah, so very, very good. This might sound slightly self-serving, but the next booklet coming out is on pastors and politics, and it takes us back to the early pastors of the 18th century, the chaplains and others, which is something Kelly's talked about. So if you are one of our donors, you'll be receiving that pretty soon in the mail, and it just emphasizes, again, what Kelly said. One of the first things General Washington did was establish the chaplaincy. We have a lot more to cover. I want to talk about some of these judicial nominations, and you can also hear Penna Dexter's commentary right now. We'll be back right after this.
Chelsea Clinton gives legal abortion credit for boosting the American economy. Speaking at a Planned Parenthood-sponsored rally opposing the confirmation of Brett Kavanaugh to the U.S. Supreme Court, she attempted to help her audience of abortion activists add financial persuasion to their arsenal of arguments for abortion rights. Ms. Clinton stated, American women entering the labor force from 1973 to 2009 added $3.5 trillion to our economy, right? Actually, the 60-plus million abortions that have taken place since the Roe v. Wade decision have constituted a huge drag on our economy. In 1998, the late Larry Burkett, a highly regarded financial expert, argued that, quote, it is largely because of abortion on demand that by the year 2030, the ratio of workers to Social Security beneficiaries will be reduced to only 2 to 1. 2 workers will be supporting 1 retiree. When the program began in the 1930s, 42 workers supported each retiree. Dennis Howard spent 30 years as a market researcher and consultant for major corporations. He is currently president of the pro-life group Movement for a Better America. He has researched the economic impact of abortion since 1995, using data from Planned Parenthood's own Alan Guttmacher Institute and gross domestic product per capita. He argues that the loss of lives due to abortion provides a cumulative drag on GDP that will keep growing no matter what. Because of the echo effect, he writes, 61.4 million missing births in one generation automatically means 61 million fewer births in the next. Those are workers we need right now. And tax revenues. If Chelsea Clinton's utilitarian economic case for abortion were correct, she would be presenting a stark moral choice between money and human lives. The reality is, abortion has not only eroded our workforce, it is shrinking the voter base, mostly in blue states. Arguing for abortion makes for bad economics and bad politics. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
If you ever listen to this program, you know that especially on Friday, but other days as well, we talk about the fact that to give credit where credit is due, President Donald Trump was able to push through more nominees in the first year for the appeals court than any other president, breaking the record of John F. Kennedy and Richard Nixon. And so that has been the good news. The bad news is there's still a lot of obstruction. And if you don't believe that, this particular article that is in National Review, and we'll post it later. Matter of fact, I may even do something with it on Monday, so we'll post it and spend more time on it. For those of you watching online, all you have to do is see one chart, and that is when you look at the cloture votes for executive and judicial nominees, you see virtually no problem until you get to Clinton. Then it's 8, Bush 4, Obama 12, and then Trump 110. Penna, that just makes my teeth ache because it realizes there has been an enormous amount of obstruction.
Yes, there has. And even on uncontroversial nominees, they've been following this 30-hour of debate rule, which slows things down tremendously. Now they've supposedly stayed in session through this month of August. And, I mean, I love that announcement. And, of course, we've really seen it. We've seen Mitch McConnell just move things through and sort of put blinders on and do it. And he's pledged to do it, hasn't he?
Yeah, and he stated this publicly about 2 months ago that he was going to get the people. At the time, there were 81 judges, for instance. There's others than judges, but there were 81 judges waiting for their vote. And he understands what the Senate could change hands. And if it does, then all those judges are probably dead, you know. And so he said, we're going to get all these through this year. And so I happened to be at a dinner with him like the next day, and I said, are you going to get all of these through? And he said, yes. And I said, what if we have a Supreme Court seat open up? This is before the seat opened up with Kennedy for that Kavanaugh's for. And I said, are we still going to get all 81 of these through? And he looked at me, I mean, just directly in the eye, and he said, every single one of them. And so I knew, he's not the person to do that kind of thing. He's not to say that publicly and then say that to others. And he knows what he can accomplish as the majority leader. And now we see, all of a sudden we see the first sort of hammer drop, which is they put these 12 people, these 12 judges and administration. I think there's 8 judges and 4 in the other part of the administration just that have been waiting. And he said, these are going to get through. We're going to stay in session until all of these get through. That's all they've had to do. But now he is forcing the issue, and that's an encouraging sign. Again, I think this whole thing is really wrong. I understand playing politics and stuff, but the president has a right to fill his cabinet. Now, is there an advice and consent part in the Constitution with the Senate? Sure there is. So if there's something really wrong with somebody, can they knock somebody out if they're like just totally out of kilter? Sure. But overall, we've always taken the approach that when you elect that president, they get a right to the cabinet with people with similar views, with competency and those type of things. And they're blocking everybody. It's not just one people or people they disagree with. Even people that Barack Obama nominated for judge and that Trump renominated, they block them. So
it's really just because Trump nominated them.
Yeah.
It wouldn't matter who the name was.
They want them through. They're trying to slow things down for everybody so that he can't get his people in. And so that is not the purpose of the Senate. And so they're really abusing this rule that they came up with. They came up with the rule. They should get rid of the rule. There shouldn't be this type of a delay tactic. Again, you should be able to have your people, in the cabinet, especially, I think. But now with the judges, I think that's about to end, and McConnell's about to really force the issue, as he's shown with these first 12.
Now, we talked about the blue wave for just a minute. What if the Senate goes the other direction? It's possible that a Republican Senate seat in Tennessee could go Democratic. A Republican Senate seat in Nevada could go Democratic. Some people even suggest there's a possibility a Republican seat in Arizona could go Democratic. I don't think Texas is going to go Democratic, but, that's another whole issue as well. That changes everything, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, the Senate is, to me, the even bigger issue in the midterm elections because it's teetering right now, right? You've got McCain who can't really vote. So really, it's like a 50-50 almost, or a 50-49 right now. And so you lose a couple of seats on the Republican side, and you could really, you could have that change. All the nominations. That's why McConnell is moving to push these people through, because the odds are with the Republicans. There's 36 seats up, and 26 of them are Democrats.
But you can't count on anything in politics.
But so the odds are all tilted towards the Republicans being able to either keep or pick up even a couple of seats. But you don't know that could easily not happen, as you just mentioned. And if it doesn't, then all the nominations cease, all the judicial confirmations stop. And so to me, the Senate is the much more important election between the House and the Senate in the upcoming elections.
Well, I think that's also the reason why you're seeing McConnell sort of drop this hammer right now, because the Democrats do have a lot more Senate seats to defend in this cycle than the Republicans do. And if you're in Washington, D.C., 5, 6, 7 days a week voting or debating, if you want to stick to this 30-hour debate rule, you are not at home campaigning. And several of those Democrat senators that are on the ballot are in states that Trump won handily. And they need something to go back and tell those people, I'm not the Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, Ocasio-Cortez kind of Democrat. See, I'm voting for Trump's nominees. You know, I'm going to vote to confirm Kavanaugh, or I'm with McConnell. They should at least get a vote. Folks like Manchin in West Virginia,
Senator Manchin,
Claire McCaskill in Missouri, all of these people who need to be at home campaigning right now. I would love to be a fly on the wall in a meeting that they might have with Chuck Schumer about this 30-hour debate rule. And you know what? We need to be at home campaigning right now if you want us to come back. And if we got to limit debate, then we limit debate. You know, I think that's why you're seeing McConnell do this now, because it is coming down the stretch of the election. You can be obstructionist, but you're not going to be able to go home and campaign.
There was a poll that just came out for a number of these states, Indiana, I think North Dakota, and while the national poll on Kavanaugh was like 47-46, which is kind of typical, it was the same with Sotomayor. It was the same with every time you do a national poll, they're like split, Democrat, Republican, and there's half the people hate them, half the people like them. They really don't know what they're talking about because they don't even know who they are.
Sure.
But that's the way it is. In these states, it's fascinating. In these states, Indiana and North Dakota and I think West Virginia, it was like 60-25. It was like the people of those states were saying, I like Kavanaugh. I want him through. So, again, if you're Manchin or you're Connolly or you're Heitkamp or you're the Democrat in these states that were heavily carried by Trump, I just cannot see them voting against Kavanaugh. And as Lathan was saying, I don't see them wanting to sit in Washington, D.C. when they need to be campaigning. So this is pretty smart of McConnell to wait until they really need to campaign and then say, okay, if you're going to play the games now, you're going to play them to your own detriment, and we're still going to get these people through.
Yeah.
So we'll see what breaks with all this, but definitely we're starting to see some action on the judges.
Again, if you're Senator Joe Manchin, if you're Senator Claire McCaskill, you're just going, these are tough votes, but if you don't make those votes in that way, that could end your career in the Senate. So it's something to think about. We have to take a break, and when we come back, we will also talk about some other issues. One of those is Penna Dexter's commentary, which is available right now on our website. It's a Viewpoints commentary, Chelsea's Terrible Argument, and we're going to get into the subject of abortion. And so that is one that you can find. And if you haven't signed up for the Viewpoints commentary, mine comes to your inbox Monday through Friday. Penna's comes to your inbox on Saturdays. So sign up, and we'll come back and talk about some of these other issues right after this.
It wasn't long ago, it seemed, every official decision brought religious liberty and our ability to live as faithful Christians into question. Some of us wondered how long it would be before we were literally forced to choose between obeying God or men. That pressure seems to have subsided just a bit, and now is the time not to take a breath, but to work as hard as we can for the future of our nation. Thanks to you, Point of View is doing just that. And our special thanks to those who have become members of Truth Team 360. In football, 22 guys battle it out on the field while 40 or 60,000 watch in the stands, and perhaps hundreds of thousands more watch on television. We need a special few to get out of the seats and into the game. Join today by calling 1-800-347-5151 and ask to join the Truth Team, or visit us online at pointofview.net/team. We really do need you. The nation needs you. 800-347-5151 and pointofview.net/team. Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I've recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kerby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of view, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging. Apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Back once again, if you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Been talking about a number of issues in the news, and this hour we'll get back to maybe a couple of other religious liberty cases. But if you haven't heard, we've, of course, talked about a very significant victory for liberty. We will certainly talk about one of the other articles we've pointed out. Should the president fire the attorney general? And that will get us into some of the conversation about Paul Manafort and Michael Cohen and some others. But Penna, the commentary that you do each time that we get together on Friday are certainly available on our website. But this one's entitled Chelsea's Terrible Argument. We have mentioned this before, but I am so glad you took the time to write about this, because Chelsea Clinton was trying to basically say, if it weren't for abortion, we wouldn't have such a great economy. Really?
Yeah, it was kind of fun. This comes on a string, for me, of writing about the population and the lack thereof. And so it was kind of a timely topic, because Chelsea Clinton, she claimed at this rally, and it's called Rise Up for Roe, was the rally, and she was the speaker there. And she was basically saying that Roe versus Wade was a good thing, not only because, and this is her quote, it gave women the dignity to make our own choices, but also because it boosted, quote unquote, the American economy by $3.5 trillion. And of course, she's talking about the women entering the workforce. But she's ignoring a lot of other things, like, 61 trillion fewer people born. And most of those people are not going to be drags on the economy. They're going to be net increases to the economy and taxpayers. And so even if you look at it just from the economic side of this very cold argument that she made, she's wrong. And so it was just, I don't know, it was a great place to get her. And I don't notice too many people supporting her, because not only was it wrong economically, the argument just sounded very callous and cold.
I know.
And it's just sort of sad.
Again, I don't claim to know all the economic issues that all of other candidates seem to, but you take 60 million people out of the workforce, Kelly, that seems like that would affect Social Security.
Yeah, Social Security, it affects, how many, people, that would have been in that 60 million would have invented things that just literally changed all of our lives. How many would have been the next, Beethoven of music, or we just go through. The potential. Anybody who understands that people are created in the image of God, their capacity for incredible things. To have another 60 million, when you look at how many we have now, 300 and something million, 1/5 or 1/6, I guess it would be if you added to it. Do you think there would be potential for incredible ideas, incredible advances, things that we can't even imagine that we've lost? And all those people out there that are going, man, I can't find any really good people right now.
Yes.
This is part of the problem. Mm-hmm. So it definitely is a negative. And the good news is that we're actually in a time now, at least, where we're trying to change that culture. The younger people are more pro-life. Again, whatever you think about Trump and what he really believes, he's been called the most pro-life president in the history of the country because of what he's done. There are a lot of things happening that are very much in favor of sanctity of life. So that's the good news side of this. But the bad news is you look back over the past and you go, wow, what a lost potential and what a damage to our country in so many ways.
You know, Penna, let me just mention, when people go to our website and click on viewpoints, they can go to other viewpoints and they can find Penna Dexter's commentary on missing workers, for example, and then go a little bit further and they can find some of the others you've written about the demographic winter and the birth dearth. You've been doing this for a couple of weeks now. We ought to turn that into a booklet or something, or some material resource, because we are at a point where we have aborted so many, and we're living now with the consequences of decisions made in the past, in which it's hard to find workers, it's hard to balance the budget, it's hard to get Social Security and Medicare to work, and a lot of that has to do with when you take almost 61 million individuals who could have been productive members of society out of the economy by killing them in the womb.
Yeah, and half of those would have been women, and then they would have had 1.7 children, per woman. So you would, it's just ongoing. I mean, it's an ongoing sort of echo effect.
To me, it demonstrates a certain mentality about life on the left that is it's just sad to me. She sees these potential human beings as numbers in a system, and she sees a financial benefit to these people not existing, to say nothing of what they would have done for their family and families of their own. We talk about the Holocaust in World War II, and we have museums to remind people so that never happens again. This is far beyond what happened there. And to reduce human life to just cogs in a machine that either improve it or don't it just saddens me for our country, that any political party, whether you're Republican or Democrat, that any political party would have this as a basis of ideology for their entire movement. I mean, there are things that Democrats and Republicans agree on, disagree on. You will hear which party has the bigger tent, where there's room for ideological differences. You are hard pressed to find a pro-life Democrat these days, because
you're sort of banished from the party.
Exactly, because they can't win a primary. And when your primary process is who's the most Democrat of Democrats or who's the most Republican of Republicans, your party ideologically gets pushed further and further in one direction.
Let me take some phone calls because some of you want to say the same kind of thing. So let's go to Florida. First of all, Rick, what would you like to add to our conversation today?
Well, I was just calling Kerby to say that the Democratic Party has left a lot of the Democrats in the dust. And what I'm meaning by that is my mother and daddy, which are both in their 80s, are Democrats and have been for life here in Florida. But they've been voting Republican for the last several years. I started out as a Democrat because you had to be one here in rural Florida to have any say in the local elections.
Sure.
But now, I'm a registered Republican now, but they're not going to change. I got a World War II veteran that is a registered Democrat, but he's going to vote Republican. And here in the great state of Florida, we're trying our best to get Rick Scott to be our next senator. We just need to get the seriousness of this election out to the people. We know that President Trump has promised us he would appoint conservative judges. Well, he told us he was pro-life also. And with Neil Gorsuch and Brett Kavanaugh, he has fulfilled his promises. And a lot of other good things for every American, Republican or Democrat.
Yep.
He's been working hard to prove to our military, our police, our veterans, and to every American that he is for the well-being of the common people.
I think you've made your case, and glad a head is shaking right now, but I've got one of those mandatory breaks, and I see everybody around the table like to talk about that. So if you want to stay with us, fine. If not, we'll come back and talk about some of the things Rick put on the table. We'll be back right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
No doubt when you were growing up, some adult admonished you to say what you mean and mean what you say. That advice should be spread far and wide when politicians, commentators, and others use words and phrases without any precision. When the New York Times hired Sarah Jeong, critics pointed to all of her tweets and verbal attacks on white people and law enforcement. J.G. McCullough, in a recent commentary, reminds us that one of the defenses of her horrible statements was that all of this was done satirically and hyperbolically. Well, using extreme language and hyperbole may get you hired at the New York Times, but it won't work in the real world. While taking a tour of the White House, say you wish you could kill the president. See how that works out for you. While you're in a police station, say that you wish all the cops would die. I doubt you'd get a linguistic pass for that statement. And the term fake news used to be applied to websites, like The Onion, that use satire to make a political point. Today, the term has been so overused that it's almost meaningless. For most people today, the term fake news is used to describe a story or a news organization they dislike. And while we're talking about hyperbole and fake news, we need to mention the president's tweets. Some of his defenders try to defend his indefensible comments by saying we shouldn't always take what he writes literally. No, we should take the words and actions of a president seriously. We also have heard the term deep state used indiscriminately. It used to mean a nefarious group of insiders in a foreign government. Today it's often used to describe some federal bureaucrat you don't like and don't trust. These are just a few examples of why our elders told us to say what you mean and mean what you say. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kerby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back once again, Penna Dexter, Kelly Shackelford, Lathan Watts with us, and Rick's still on the line. And Rick, just before I let you go, because we had a break, I wanted to just give you a chance to make a final comment. But your comment about the fact that it used to be that everybody in the South was pretty much a Democrat, and it's not that you moved, but it seems like the Democratic Party has moved, and you don't feel like you have a home there anymore. Is that a fair statement?
Thank you for taking my call. I appreciate that. But yes, the Democratic Party has left us years ago, and they're continuing to leave more and more people because they're taking on socialism. So hopefully, people will turn out, think about this and pray about it. Before the election, the presidential election, you really went to work on the people of faith to get out and pray about this.
Yes.
And now I think, prayer is essential, and prayer helps us to align what God wants us to do. And so I think we need to be praying for the midterms also. And we need to get out and show our support for President Trump, what he's been doing, how he's been working hard for the people, for everybody, Democrats and Republicans. And I, for one, am committed to do all I can, to show my support for every Republican. And, that's just the way I feel about it because they have the conservative base now. So I just want some suggestions on what we need to do to rally the troops.
Very good. Kelly, first of all, he mentioned a senatorial race in the state of Florida. That one could be very significant. And again, Donald Trump's not on the ballot. But if you want to help Donald Trump, you can elect certain people that will actually advance his agenda or stifle his agenda.
Well, yeah, that race in Florida is a very big race. That's a Nelson and Scott. I mean, that's a close race, and that could determine, we don't know. That could determine the House and what kind of, the next 150 or so judges who go on the federal courts for life, maybe the next Supreme Court justice. So those kind of things are really important, and I think of the race in Texas where O'Rourke is actually supposedly, within, 3, 4, 5 percentage points of Ted Cruz. And that race, same thing. I mean, you replace Ted Cruz with Beto O'Rourke. I mean, that's a huge change, right? And it's fascinating to see. Again, I don't know how many people around the country have seen this. It's gone national, but O'Rourke ran actually a commercial where he was saying, somebody asked him, do you think it's okay for the players to kneel during the national anthem? And he gives this rousing speech about how American that is, to wait during the national anthem to do your protesting. And of course, Ted Cruz is like, excuse me? I don't think so. I was just in the hospital with veterans, and they don't think so. They stood up, even though they could barely stand when the national anthem was played. So fascinating, this difference between the candidates when you're looking at this. And this is in a lot of states where it could go either way, and it's going to make the Senate. I know the question he asked was, what can we do? Number one, you can pray. Number two, you can make sure that you're registered to vote, and then make sure that anybody else that you think would be a good person to go vote is registered to vote and ready to vote, and provide information. I know Point of View has it on their website.
We'll have a link to any one that we can find, all these different voter guides in each one of the states. You'll be able to click on that state and find all the voter guides we're aware of. And some of them are from local groups. Some of them are from Concerned Women for America or American Family Association, because we want you to have as much information as possible.
Right. So you can vote all the way up and down. And but I just think, multiply yourself, right? If you know how you believe, you probably got some friends who have the right beliefs and have their head on straight. And you might say, well, they're already voting. Well, I bet you can find somebody who's not. And I'm not talking, in the general elections for president, the turnout is very large, okay? But there's still tons of people who should vote and aren't. But in this one, this is about turnout. This is about getting people to vote and getting them information on why they should do that, like the fact that the Senate is up for grabs. And so all the Supreme Court nominees, all the lower court nominees, all these lifetime appointments are going to be determined by the Senate.
Yeah, the enthusiasm, I think, is a real issue, because a lot of conservatives are really kind of like complacent right now. I think they think that they think that their party is holding the House and the Senate. In one sense, their parties are, but conservatives not necessarily in the House all the time. They have the mid-moderate type conservative or type Republican has a lot of control and power. So there are a lot of conservatives who are disappointed in the House, and but they ought to think of the alternative if the House goes to the other party. I mean, they're going to have a lot of things that are really going to make bad.
And if
policy.
both the House and the Senate go?
Yeah, if both the House and Senate go. But, I mentioned...
He just looks at me funny when I say that.
I mentioned a few things earlier of what people could do.
Go for it.
One is, with House races, talk about who would be the speaker, who would be in leadership. Mm-hmm. And, maybe that will get some people nervous. Also, I think the Republicans need to pass some good legislation.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
They need to, because there's so many attacks on them and on the president, they need to look like they're really doing things, and they need to do things so that, they can have more on their record to talk about. Substance. It's got to be about substance. Immigration and working on the border, talking about a wall, talking about stopping the flow, especially now we've got another terrible, tragic murder on our hands of a young woman out of the University of Iowa.
Right.
And tout the economy. And if your senator or your House member's at risk, don't be complacent. Give them money. Put the sign in your yard. Just do things.
Well, and the sign, I've told this story before, but it's worth one more time. We mentioned Ted Cruz just a minute ago, and right now in the state of Texas, you can go anywhere and see the Congressman O'Rourke signs. They're called Beto signs, and you sometimes have a better chance of seeing a unicorn than a Ted Cruz sign. And so I went and tried to figure that out. Well, since I'm a precinct chairman, I asked what was going on in our county, and they said, well, we don't have any Ted Cruz signs. So we actually got from the Cruz campaign some of the logos, and we printed our own signs. And so when they distributed all of those, somebody else called up and said, how did you get that from the Cruz campaign? And the person that called is a man by the name of James Dickey. He's the chairman of the Texas Republican Party, and he couldn't even get that. So there's a difficulty sometimes in some of these national campaigns in terms of money, in terms of manpower, and things like that. So that gets us back, Penna, like you said, put up a sign, volunteer, give, and most importantly, Kelly, it's getting your friends to come to the polls, because if you and 4 other friends go and vote that day, you're going to have a disproportionate impact because it's a midterm election.
Absolutely. So those are the things. Again, the energy is, as usual, the energy is with the Democrat side, the anti-incumbent side.
Look at all those signs.
And look at, I mean, for instance, look at Ted Cruz's race. I think he's being outraised.
3 to 1 sometimes.
2 or 3 to 1.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And same is happening in a number of these House seats. But you know what? Money does make a big difference because you can run a lot of commercials and things. But ultimately, it's about who goes to vote and who spreads the information around so their friends know where people stand on the issues. And this is going to be all about turnout. And I mean, the next 2 years are really going to be different depending upon what people do. Either we're going to have 2 years of a House that's doing impeachment all the time, and of course, you got to get a 2/3 vote in the Senate to convict. So it's not going to happen.
Not going to happen.
But it's just going to be, crazy, and nothing's going to really happen for 2 years. And then on the Senate side, you've got, do you want judges on the court? Do you want maybe another Supreme Court justice? I mean, all that's going to be decided by this midterm election.
One of the things that Rick was talking about is leaving the Democratic Party, and one of the things that Penn and I have been looking at is this article that came out about the #walkaway campaign, and it says Democrats are leaving their party in droves, and conservatives should pay attention. But what it is so interesting is that I think Rick is just a good illustration of the fact that some people have tried to minimize this. Remember when we had the whole idea of the Tea Party? Well, that's just AstroTurf. Well, the other day, interestingly enough, Stephen Colbert and a few others have said the #walkaway campaign is run by the Russian bots. I don't think so. I think there are a number of people that have said, I didn't leave the party left me. And that's a direct quote from a man by the name of Ronald Reagan,
My
so
hero.
I think we see some of that as well. We need to take a break. And when we come back, though, I want to come back to a couple of those issues, because one that might have some impact is, the cases involving Paul Manafort and Michael Cohen. So that's one of those issues. And, of course, we talked earlier about this idea of a blue wave. So that's one issue. And then, of course, we also have our religious liberty experts here. And we announced one very significant victory, but we've got a couple others you need to know about. So all of that is available at the website, pointofview.net. As you go there, click on the See More, and you're going to see a very long list of articles, some of which we've been able to get to, others we're going to try to get to, including, if you just joined us, that press release about Chaplain Scott Squires. We'll take a break and come back with more right after this.
There is no more dangerous time than when things are going well. Remember Elijah on Mount Carmel? Fire came down. There was no doubt who was God, but what happened next? He went from amazing faith to a time of great fear and depression. Many Christians have been very thankful a certain Democratic candidate for president was not the one to nominate 2 replacements for the Supreme Court. But as with Elijah, times of great victory are also times of great danger. Moments like this are not the time to take it easy. This is not the time to let our guard down. This is a time to double down on our work in the community, to serve and pray and plan and invest in a better future. This is the time to join Point of View's Truth Team 360 to make sure today's promising gains are not lost tomorrow. Show your commitment to our future by visiting pointofview.net/team or call 800-347-5151. Ask to join the Truth Team. Pointofview.net/team. and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, is Kerby Anderson.
Back once again, it is our weekend edition. Penna Dexter, Lathan Watts, as well as Kelly Shackelford. And Penna, we've got a couple stories. One that we want to talk about in terms of a judge, and then I want to get into some of these religious liberty cases as well.
Well, Kelly knows who all these nominees are and the new judges that are being picked for the Fifth Circuit because it's right in our region of the country. And we've been so happy about some of them. But there's one nominee now that's kind of slipped through or been pushed through by people that probably shouldn't have had so much influence, who's worrisome. He hasn't been confirmed yet. And so, in a sense, we're hoping that actually senators can be persuaded not to confirm him. And so tell us about it, Kelly.
Yeah, this is Judge Ozerton, and this is in Mississippi. What happens is when you have these high-level, the Federal Court of Appeals right underneath the Supreme Court, the senators have a lot of say, but ultimately the White House makes the decision because we're talking about right underneath the Supreme Court. Well, one of the people that's been floated for the top by the Mississippi senators is a guy who actually has not been very good on religious liberty. As you know, when we had the Obamacare cases with all the, Little Sisters of the Poor, and we represented Insight for Living, Chuck Swindoll's, and there are all those ministries around the country. One of the law firms that represented the Catholic Church had a lawsuit in New York that they won that, yes, you have to adjudicate this. And the exact same case essentially came to this judge in Mississippi. And he, despite having all the information of how to rule correctly, the fact that there was another decision, having the same lawyers, he didn't even give the Catholic Church a hearing. I mean, just threw them out completely. And it just showed a real callousness to religious liberty. And we're like, this cannot be the guy for the Fifth Circuit when, in fact, we're right now at the Fifth Circuit. It's like an 8-8 tie. They just had a vote, for instance, on the Second Amendment. And
right.
So this is literally the tipping point.
Yes, it is.
And there are some great people who could be federal Court of Appeals judges on the Fifth Circuit. And so we're hoping and we're hopeful that the president will not pick this person, but will actually pick somebody that's really strong, and that will actually be that tipping point at the Fifth Circuit to make the entire Fifth Circuit strong. But this is one of those battles where people can really have an influence.
What can they do?
Well, if you can call your senator. If you're in Mississippi, for instance, especially. You can say, look, we don't want an establishment judge, which Judge Ozerton is. We want somebody, and you say, well, he's just one case on religious freedom, that one. Well, he's also got some Second Amendment stuff that they would like to talk about. But the point is, why pick somebody who has a blemish before they even start when there's so many good people that don't have that? And there are some great choices out there, and I would just encourage people. This is an important time to get a good pick for this Fifth Circuit position.
So he's Judge Sul, S-U-L, Ozerden, O-Z-E-R-D-E-N.
That's right.
And he's one that, out of all the nominees that have been so good, he's not a nominee yet. He's just at risk of being nominated.
They're making the decision. The president will have to make this decision. It's his call. But this is, I think, he's risen to the top in some people because the Mississippi senators have been kind of pushing him. And, you never know all the details with these things. I mean, sometimes it's like, well, so-and-so's my brother's friend and all that. And the good thing about Trump is, and his team, Don McGahn, White House counsel, is that they have not been doing that. They have been saying, no. We want the best judges in the country. We want judges who are originalists, who are really humble. They're not trying to be a legislator. They're going to do the right thing. We don't have to worry about them because we know they're going to stick to the Constitution, and they're going to be hard as nails and sticking to the Constitution. And so we've got to have people that are not anti-religious freedom. I mean, we just had a case in the Fifth Circuit just a few weeks ago where the lower court judge was going to allow in a lawsuit that didn't even involve the Catholic Church, it was going to allow forcing them to give up all their interpersonal emails.
All their records.
Right?
Yeah.
And now that was overturned at the Fifth Circuit because of Jim Ho, one of Trump's new appointments, and Judge Jones. That was 2-1 decision. So if Jim Ho had not been the right type of an appointment by Trump, that would have been a loss. And all of a sudden, the Catholic Church's, their internal emails about a pro-life issue would have been, the government has control of it. So these are really important. And so I would encourage a really good judge for this pick at the Fifth Circuit. And everybody's got senators, but certainly if you're in Mississippi or even Texas, I think is close by, and Louisiana, all those can certainly weigh in. And, of course, you could also weigh in with the president or whoever else. Hey, thank you for what you're doing, but make sure you pick a good judge. Oserton is not the best choice because he's already got a blemish on religious freedom.
Let me just mention that your article that came out on Tuesday in the Daily Caller, we'll put that up right now because,
Okay.
as Penna mentioned a minute ago, people are going to say, well, what do I say? Well, you've got an article there. We'll put it up there, and it's Oserton, which is Ozeerden, Oserton. And so that will be the case. But if it goes the right way, this would be the first really conservative circuit court, because we've talked about recently, we were talking about Judge Ho on that case having to do with it 8-7 going the other way, and he wrote the dissent. Now it's 8-8, and eventually it could be 9-8.
That's right.
And that would be the first kind of Trump court, if you will, which would be very different than the Fourth Circuit or the Ninth Circuit, don't you
That's
think?
right.
So it just illustrates again that these judges and these appointments and this election are really, really important. Let's, if we can, just before we run out of time, because I do want to get to religious liberty cases. We had Tony Dungy here the other day, and he was talking about his support for Joe Kennedy. But I thought we'd also spend some time talking about something that we just knew was going to happen, and that is we have an individual who was quoting scripture at a football camp, and our friends with the Freedom from Religion Foundation had a problem with it. Tell us more.
Well, it's outrageous. They basically had somebody who was, a player not too many years earlier and now a pastor. But they asked him to come and talk to the kids, kind of a character, kind of a, rev them up and do the right thing and stand for what's right and show your character and your courage. And in the process, he mentioned a scripture verse. Well, what was the scripture verse? Was it like, John 3:16 or what? No, it was as iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. And the Freedom from Religion went crazy because he used a scripture verse. It's like, it's not like illegal, to mention the scripture. It's just crazy. I mean, there's a Bible probably in the school library, which there should be. The Supreme Court said if you don't have the Bible as part of your instruction, you're really probably not doing a good job. So fortunately, the school has rebuffed the Freedom from Religion Foundation and said, you guys just get lost. They've ignored them. But most people don't, and they cave and they try to shut down. Nobody can mention the Bible at school anymore, or they'll do something that totally crazy that actually does violate the Constitution. So, yeah, that's Connor McKay, did nothing wrong, did the right thing, and the school district and the school has done the right thing as well. So we were happy to come to their defense and glad that the Freedom from Religion Foundation is being ignored because what they said is just ridiculous.
Yeah, I was in Arkansas last week meeting with Pastor McKay and some of the folks in the community there, and I'm very confident that they are going to continue to ignore Freedom from Religion Foundation. Made me proud of my home state when I went back there and talked to them. They were pretty clear on the fact that a bunch of angry little people in Madison, Wisconsin are not going to come down here and tell us what to do. So I think that community is in good hands, and I think they're going to continue going down the right path, which I encourage everybody to do the exact same thing if you get a letter from Freedom from Religion Foundation. Just ignore it.
And that's the point, is that there are going to be more of these. I mean, football season is now taking place. Matter of fact, I'm going to go watch.
How do they find out if you said iron sharpens iron?
The
How do they figure that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there was a newspaper article about Connor being a former player and now being invited back. And
yeah. And again, people listen to this, they go, is this really happening? It's like, oh no, it's much worse than this. You hadn't even heard about the Hauge case yet, where an 80-year-old couple is being told that they're going to be evicted because they held a Bible study in their apartment. The stuff that we're having to fight is incredible, but it's really important. This is the second case like this that we've had here just recently, where people tried to come into a senior living facility or these types of places and tell them that they weren't allowed to ever discuss their faith in the common area, or now even holding a Bible study.
Yeah. And I still love that sign. Any and all Christian music is banned on the piano.
Yes.
And so that's one case, which we'll talk about after the break. But we also are privileged to have Lathan, who just spent some time with the Hauges, and will tell us a little bit more about their story in Fredericksburg, Virginia. And both of those articles are on the website, as well as the one about, of course, our football quoting individuals. So you've got all sorts of things you can find. Of course, you can also go to First Liberty and find those as well. Let's take a break. We'll come back and talk with Lathan about the Hauge case right after this.
Chelsea Clinton gives legal abortion credit for boosting the American economy. Speaking at a Planned Parenthood-sponsored rally opposing the confirmation of Brett Kavanaugh to the U.S. Supreme Court, she attempted to help her audience of abortion activists add financial persuasion to their arsenal of arguments for abortion rights. Ms. Clinton stated, American women entering the labor force from 1973 to 2009 added $3.5 trillion to our economy, right? Actually, the 60-plus million abortions that have taken place since the Roe v. Wade decision have constituted a huge drag on our economy. In 1998, the late Larry Burkett, a highly regarded financial expert, argued that, quote, it is largely because of abortion on demand that by the year 2030, the ratio of workers to Social Security beneficiaries will be reduced to only 2 to 1. 2 workers will be supporting 1 retiree. When the program began in the 1930s, 42 workers supported each retiree. Dennis Howard spent 30 years as a market researcher and consultant for major corporations. He is currently president of the pro-life group Movement for a Better America. He has researched the economic impact of abortion since 1995, using data from Planned Parenthood's own Alan Guttmacher Institute and gross domestic product per capita. He argues that the loss of lives due to abortion provides a cumulative drag on GDP that will keep growing no matter what. Because of the echo effect, he writes, 61.4 million missing births in one generation automatically means 61 million fewer births in the next. Those are workers we need right now. And tax revenues. If Chelsea Clinton's utilitarian economic case for abortion were correct, she would be presenting a stark moral choice between money and human lives. The reality is, abortion has not only eroded our workforce, it is shrinking the voter base, mostly in blue states. Arguing for abortion makes for bad economics and bad politics. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
For a few more minutes, just wanted to, if nothing else, update you on one other religious liberty case. You can find all of those at First Liberty, but this is an article. It's the second article we've posted here, and it's the Ken Hauge case at First Liberty, and it has to do with a really remarkable set of circumstances in which you have a retired Lutheran minister right there in what is eventually a senior citizens facility, who decides that because they had asked him to have a Bible study, and that's called a business activity, and the community realty company says, if you don't stop, we're going to evict you. Lathan, you've met with them, so tell me what they're like and tell me how this happened.
Just the sweetest people you would want to know, the exact kind of people you want to have for neighbors. Ken and his wife live, as you said, he's a retired Lutheran minister, moved into this complex a little over a year ago, I believe. And there was already a desire for a Bible study there. There was already a group of people that had talked about it and wanted to do it. And then when he moved in and they knew he was a pastor, a minister, they said, well, perfect. We finally have somebody who can kind of organize it, lead it. And they asked him, and he was, of course, willing to do so. And they initially tried to have it in the community room there at the complex, as any other group of people, organizing a meeting would do. And at first, the the management told them, okay, but you have to call it a book study or a book review or like Oprah's book club, or just don't say Bible. Then they came out with new rules for the community room that banned all religious activity. So in order to try to comply, these people they weren't trying to stir up trouble. They weren't looking for a fight. They were just trying to have a Bible study. Yeah. So one of the Bible study members offered her apartment as a place for them to gather, and they did. And not too long after this, Ken Hauge gets a letter from the management saying he's been using that he's violated his lease, using residential property for commercial purposes, and that if he continues to do it, he's going to be evicted. So here's a man facing homelessness, essentially, for leading a Bible study in Fredericksburg, Virginia, the United States of America.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're not coming back from China here.
Exactly. Yeah. So they've obviously, talked to First Liberty. We've agreed to represent them, and we've contacted the management company, and we hope that they will do the right thing. We're waiting to hear what their response is going to be to our letter, where we politely inform them of a minor piece of legislation called the Fair Housing Act.
And by the way, the letter's available there, so people can click on that and see the letter that you sent in case they need one for their own senior center.
Yeah, exactly, because this is not the first time we've dealt with this.
And the important thing, these people are in a place where many of them can't go outside the facility, to a Bible study.
Right.
They're 80 years old. They're people in different health situations, and many of them, told Lathan, "This is my only way." So the idea that they're now being banned from even going to study the Bible with other people, it's really sad. But this is why this is so important. Why the Donna Dunbar case that we have, where they tried the same type of thing. Any and all Christian music is banned in the common area, and can't have a Bible study, and you can't. Those are important for those individuals and those who are there who can't get out and can't go places. But it's important because of the precedent it sets, because there are a lot, millions and millions and millions of people that are in that situation, and they can't have their religious freedom taken away from them. And again, I feel confident. The law is on our side, and I feel good about the HUD commissioner, too. I think he's pretty pro-religious liberty. So if we ever have to get to Ben Carson, I think he'll want to do the right thing, too, and follow the law. So I feel like it's just a matter of time, but we definitely have to stand up and make sure that this stops, because this is happening too often around the country.
And you mentioned an important point, that it's not, yes, it's very important for these specific people and their situation, but this situation could play itself out in facilities all over the country. And so in order for you to stand up for your rights, you have to know what they are. And there's a lot of resources at firstliberty.org. We just encourage people to go to our website, follow not just the cases, but there are religious liberty protection kits and lots of things that you can learn from, and make sure that you know what your rights are in order to be able to defend them. And then if you face a situation like that, obviously get in touch with us.
It's one of those things where I bet you every single person listening, this affects you.
Yeah.
Do you have a friend who's living in a place with a common area like that, or maybe that wants to hold a Bible study in their room? Do you have a mom, a grandmom? I can't imagine there's anybody that doesn't have someone who this impacts. And so it's one of those things where when we do the right thing, we bless many others. And so people need to really be praying for the Hauges, the Donna Dunbar, all these situations, and the First Liberty attorneys on these cases. We just need to make sure we get really strong victories, and then hopefully we can reduce the chance of this happening as it has been over and over again around the country.
Let me just, before we get into anything else, you mentioned those protection kits, those religious liberty protection kits, and one of the questions we always get is, I go to the website and I can't find it. And I just did it right now, because you have to click first, take action, then go to resources, then go to protection kits. So they've changed the way you get to those.
That's at the Point of View website.
No, this is at the First
Liberty
Liberty
is it?
website.
Okay.
Take
it
action
You
first.
used to have one that was on the drop-down menu that said resources, and people could find it. But now you have to hit Take Action Resources Protection Kits, and then you'll find those. But for business, for military, for
what are your rights?
Whatever those are,
students and teachers.
Yeah, because that's right now, you know as well as I do, we just have one case of somebody getting in trouble for quoting a Bible verse, but now we're in football season. You know there's going to be all sorts of cases, aren't there, Kelly?
Yeah, we're waiting for Coach Kennedy's case at the Supreme Court. So, a lot of people are going to be watching that. So, there's going to be a lot of these things going on where people don't know what their rights are. And what we encourage people to do is the enemy always uses the same methodology, lies and fear. So don't allow yourself to be intimidated out of being who God wants you to be. At the very least, you can call us and we can walk you through it, or you can grab a pamphlet or whatever online, or it's easy to do. I would just say, if you're being led by the Spirit to do something, you probably have every right to do it, and don't allow yourself to be intimidated out of doing so.
So again, just a few things we might just mention that happened in the last hour, and that is Scott Squires, very significant victory. Talk about that just before we run out of time.
Well, we had a victory while we were on air today. Chaplain Squires, as well as Assistant Chaplain Casey Griffin. We had a complete and total victory and reversal in both of their scenarios. Again, he was going to be possibly up for court-martial for following his faith as a chaplain and following Army regulations, and she was losing her college and everything else. So this is a significant victory for them, but it's also, I think, a real message to chaplains that, we've got their back, the law has their back, and that they can be the chaplains, and really anybody in the military can be people of faith. They have those freedoms, they have those protections. Don't be intimidated out of it because we're winning all these cases.
Penn, if nothing else, we're ending with a victory today.
We are, and it's so good because when you have that news, and I hope it gets out far and wide, then it causes others to have courage and stand up for their rights.
It was just fun to watch it going from fighting to win there on the website. So I got a chance to watch that and got a chance to be part of this. Thank you guys for taking the time. I know 3 hours is a lot for those busy lawyers, but it's great to have you here. Penn, I'm looking forward to next week. I know you'll be back as well with Kelly, and we're looking forward to another very busy week here on Point of View. Have a great weekend, and I want to thank Andrew and Steve for their help behind the scenes. Enjoy the weekend. We'll see you back here on Monday right here on Point of View.
It wasn't long ago, it seemed, every official decision brought religious liberty and our ability to live as faithful Christians into question. Some of us wondered how long it would be before we were literally forced to choose between obeying God or men. That pressure seems to have subsided just a bit, and now is the time not to take a breath, but to work as hard as we can for the future of our nation. Thanks to you, Point of View is doing just that. And our special thanks to those who have become members of Truth Team 360. In football, 22 guys battle it out on the field while 40 or 60,000 watch in the stands, and perhaps hundreds of thousands more watch on television. We need a special few to get out of the seats and into the game. Join today by calling 1-800-347-5151 and ask to join the Truth Team, or visit us online at pointofview.net/team. We really do need you. The nation needs you. 800-347-5151 and pointofview.net/team. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kerby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating